Well, we are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're with James Smallwood. He's the president of the Nashville Fraternal Order of Police, and appreciate him coming on this morning. Talking about issues facing Metro Police Department. Chief among them, at least folks discussing right now, is the plans for a proposed civilian oversight board for the PD and where that goes and whether or not you'll have a right to vote on it in Metro. But at the larger picture, wherever you're watching, and you know, we have viewers all throughout Middle Tennessee, not just Nashville. If you have questions about body cameras or the issues police are facing, this is an individual who works, firsthand with it in one of the state's largest cities. So appreciate him coming on. Let's take a few calls. We'll start off with, I believe we've got Brian. Brian, good morning. Hi, Brian.
Yeah, I remember when you asked him, he said we already have some things in place for oversight of the police, and you asked him what exactly are those, and then he said, well, we can get into that later, or, we have certain things and whatever. But I do believe they're specifically, and I think they're Metro employees, but there's a couple of guys or a couple ladies and a couple women that work within the city, and I think their job is to keep an eye on the police. It's not the internal affairs, but it's called something else.
We talked about that during the break, Brian, and great question. I was saying, let's talk about those layers real quick. I know we don't have all show to talk about that,
sure, but
the different layers, and you kind of ran it down for me, starting, I guess, with the district attorney's office, right?
Well, it would start with the Office of Professional Accountability, which is led by a civilian.
All right, Office of Professional, is that maybe the one he was referring to?
That's our Internal Affairs Division. He's probably referring to the Civil Service Commission, which is all civilian overseen, all civilian led, and they oversee a lot of our disciplinary process. Okay,
how would that be different than this Citizens Oversight Committee, the Civil Service?
It's not necessarily. They review every aspect of disciplinary procedure that's appealed. So if we take something to them as an appeal, they'll review that disciplinary procedure and make a decision. If that decision is disagreed with, then there's another appeal process for that to the administrative law judge, which is an attorney that will come in and look at the disciplinary procedure. And then you've got the district attorney, the civilian grand jury, there's civil and circuit courts that are there for, or criminal courts rather, that are there for accountability if an officer's done something wrong.
Internal Affairs, you have the Post? Is that
we have Tennessee Police Officer Standards Training Commission, yes.
All right, so there's at least 4 or 5 layers you're saying that are there to review if there's a situation, say in the Jacquees Clemens case or the Daniel Hamburg case, to see if things were handled properly. Mm-hmm. And there are clear guidelines with regard to officers' use of deadly force, correct?
Absolutely.
I think there's still a little bit of confusion in the minds of some about just, it's the perception of the officer at that moment and the decision to be made whether or not to stop someone. And I think you made it very clear. If a police officer tells you to drop a gun and you don't drop it, there's a good chance you're going to get shot. And I think the vast majority of people out there say that's fine. I mean, if you have a gun and you're being told to drop it, you better drop it. All right?
Yeah, we don't have to take fire before we start defending ourselves.
Now, if someone has a gun but they're not pointing it at you, but that means they could, that's more, perception of the officer involved, right?
Well, the problem is there's a lot of narratives out there saying, well, Officer Delkey wasn't in any danger because Daniel Hamburg was running away. He wasn't pointing the officer at the suspect, or he wasn't pointing the gun at the officer. And there's a lot of scientific evidence to show that in just a split second, that gun could be turned around and pointed at the officer. There's a lot of different things involving this case that show that Daniel Hamburg was in a position to do that, and that Delkey's life was in danger, and he defended himself accordingly and the community accordingly.
All right, let's go next to Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey.
Yeah. Let me start off with saying that the Metro Police Department is severely understaffed. I don't know what the budget is going to allow, but they are very, very short on people. This civilian review board you're talking about, I know your guest probably knows the answers to it. They're asking for up into the millions to fund this civilian review board, like having a leader and people working for them. So it's going to cost Metro government a bunch of money for this to take place. I think it would be better off be used to get more policemen on the street. Also, in other states, especially California and some of the other states, where there's a lot of gang activity, and it's beginning to come here. They will run and shoot back while they're running. Also, they are luring officers into a position to where they have people waiting. When they run, they have people waiting to shoot the officer. So it's like he said before, it's kind of a decision you got to make, and you got to make it pretty quick, because it's either sometimes you or them. Mm-hmm. So this thing is not a cut and dried deal.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not. Yeah, cut and dried. Would you agree? Understaffed?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How many more cops do you need?
That's a good question. You know, if you look at Memphis, for instance, they're budgeted for, I think, 2,400 officers. Mm-hmm. We're larger than them in geographic area and population, and we have currently somewhere around the range of 1,440 officers. Mm-hmm. So we're 1,000 shorter than they are. Mm-hmm. We hold a high number of special events in this city that officers are often mandated to work overtime on, and that decreases morale. It's causing an issue with retention, and recruitment right now across the country is struggling because we're having so much scrutiny placed on this profession, even though we're doing our job right most of the time. Yeah,
you believe there are young people out there that might have wanted to go into law enforcement that are having second thoughts right now, not only because of some of the criticism that law enforcement's getting, but also because, as Joe said, and he's right, officers are being targeted out there sometimes by gangs and other hoodlums.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine either coming out of college or being in another career right now and looking at law enforcement as a job change or a career change and thinking that's where I want to go, with all the public scrutiny, with the targeting of officers, with the overworked and underpaid and understaffed mentality. A lot of people are saying no, it's just not worth the $40,000 or $50,000 a year it pays.
Yeah, that's a shame. And we were talking that there was an incident in Selma, Alabama over the weekend where an officer was targeted. They thought it was an ambush, and a high-powered rifle. He was wearing a Kevlar vest, but that won't stop a high-powered rifle round. And it went through and hit him, amazingly missed his vital organs, and was able to drive away from the scene. But they say this came after several days of people taking pot shots at officers, and finally it hit, in this case, this poor officer, and he's going to be okay, but they don't have these individuals. And then what, was it this weekend over at Club Galaxy?
Yeah, on Sunday we had an incident.
Right here.
It was early in the morning, I think around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, where
outside?
Officers were responding to a call for service where I believe a female had her vehicle broken into, and when they were there responding for the call for service, shots fired went out, and a female was hit in the parking lot. They established a perimeter, they set up a crime scene, and they were rendering aid to the victims in the scene. And the suspects drove by again while there were police cars there with blue lights activated, crime scene tape up, and it was very evident that police officers were on the scene, and they fired directly at the police officers.
You believe they were firing at the officers?
I know they were firing at the officers. Okay. Yeah, where the officers were taking cover is where the bullets were hitting. So we've fostered an environment in this city where it's acceptable, apparently, to shoot at police officers, and that's just not acceptable. It's not reasonable.
When you say we foster, where does that come from? Fostering an environment. What do you mean?
We've got to bolster public safety. We've got to the administrations of this city need to stand up and say we do not accept that kind of behavior here, and discourage it. And people need to be held accountable for those actions.
Well, I would imagine they would. I don't know that anyone liked what happened there, where those officers were targeted. And if you could catch those responsible, I mean, line them up for me, man. I'll send them off. I mean, I mean, no one wants that to happen, right? But you think there's an attitude where it's okay to target officers?
Oh, I don't think, not on our side. There's certainly not. But apparently there's obviously an attitude where it's okay in the public side because it happened.
All right, let's go to Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Hi. I'll be real quick because I have a question for Smallwood and for you, Mr. Barris.
Yeah.
Was Lippard reported to the Post Commission when he was suspended for 6 days? And what percentage of the FOP live in Davidson County? And my question for you, Mr. Barris, is the FOP is getting an awful lot of one-on-one time. Will you be giving the same to the COB on Open Line or on your show?
Yeah, I was telling. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can arrange that for you with the COB if you need contact numbers, as I'm in touch with them on a daily basis.
Great, thank you, thank you. No, yeah, that's the plan, and I was even telling him it's just him today, and we were going to have the other side, the folks that are in favor of this idea of the Oversight Committee on hopefully tomorrow, or certainly this week. It's when they're available. We're giving them each a full program on that, so just so you know, that's, yeah, there's two sides to this issue, and you bet we're going to cover both of them. So, Ann, don't worry about that. We'll make sure. Do you know her question about Officer Lippert? Was he reported to the Post Commission when he was suspended?
That would be a question for the police department. We don't. The Fraternal Order Police doesn't engage in the internal activities of the police department. We represent the officers and we speak for the officers. So.
Okay. And do you know what percentage of the officers in Metro live in Metro?
It's about 50%.
It's not required necessarily.
It's not a requirement, and frankly, with the cost of living right now, officers can't afford with their salaries to live in the city. So.
I hear you. And you were telling me before the show that about 90% of the force are part of the FOP.
Somewhere between 85 and 90%.
85 and 90%. They don't necessarily, and there's dues involved with any type. There could be 10% or so, 15 that aren't members for whatever reason.
Sure.
Okay. Let's go next to Antonio, I believe. Hi, Antonio. Are you there, Antonio?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, go ahead, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have more of a comment rather than a question.
Okay.
The gentleman who's representing the FOP, his demeanor is the reason why we have to have an oversight committee. And another comment I want to make is that there's Tennessee versus Gardner. That's case law. And case law says that if a person is fleeing, you should not shoot a fleeing individial. Well, there's cases all through this phenomenon that's going on in the United States where most of the individuals were fleeing. And also, the Oversight Board would also break the barrier between the community and the law enforcement. That's why we have a problem the way we do now. When I was growing up, we had officers that would reach out to the community, take us to the movies and visit us at the Boys and Girls Club. Back in my day, it was called just the Boys Club, and they would reach out to the community. There's a barrier now. If we keep on having this barrier between the officers and having FOP saying this is not feasible as far as economic means, and it's already oversight boards that are not working now, and then you have communities that are looking at this and saying, well, you don't care nothing about us and how we feeling and the things that we're going through. You just care about protecting yours and the code of blue. We have to break that barrier. If we don't break that barrier and have oversight committees and have video cameras on the officers to ensure that we can have some trust with them, we're going to be talking about this in 2020.
I hear. Hey, so, real quick. And what did you mean with regard to his demeanor?
The demeanor of like not being a welcoming person. He's there as if he's representing a certain sector. He's not there as if he's opening to dialogue or wanting to try to find a happy medium. He's there to represent. He's there to represent the officers and officers alone. He doesn't have a open door policy per se.
Okay. I mean, what would you say to that? I mean, he's accurate in that you are here, and your first and foremost task is to represent law enforcement. And if you see something that you feel goes contrary to their best interests, you're going to probably speak out against that, right? I mean, but are you open to a dialogue?
Well, I think it's important to note something that the caller may not have known is Fraternal Order Police was actively engaged in conversations with NOAA, the community group, about this specific issue when we were trying to find a happy medium, but this referendum was introduced and those conversations kind of fell apart after this referendum was introduced, because now we're focused on what's in front of us, and what's in front of us is not something that we think is appropriate for police officers. We're actively engaged in the community. Shop with a Cop, our youth camp program, we carry a lot of youth engagement. And I think on the other side, that's just Fraternal Order Police activities. On the other side, the police department engages the community as much as they can. So to say that our doors are closed, that's necessarily not the case. Our doors are open. It's just as how much you want to participate, and we are actively looking for new ways to build trust between the community and the police department, and the community and the law enforcement officers, and the community of the FOP. It just takes a little bit of time and reasonable conversation.
All right, there were some other points he brought up that maybe we can touch on. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll do that. We've got the lines open, 737-7587. If you're on hold, stay there. And as we do go to break, just a reminder, again, he's with the Fraternal Order of Police and their point of view. We will have the other side on either tomorrow or later this week as well. That was the plan, to give everyone a full show. So we'll take a break and be back with more of your questions with our guest right after this.